Welcome to the Stek Vs Scott Pilgrim. I'm going to cover the comic, the movie, and the game all in one. Scott Pilgrim is a 6-part comic series written and drawn by Brian Lee O'Malley. It stars Scott, an underachieving 23-year-old who also plays bass for the band Stek Vs. Whilst enjoying his usual life, he falls in love with Ramona Flowers, a delivery girl he meets several times before managing to win her over. As with most women, Ramona comes with baggage. For the two of them to be together, Scott must defeat her evil exes. Ramona's League of Evil Exes is headed by Gideon Graves, a music producer who is opening a new theatre in Toronto, and so the story is set in Toronto, Canada. It features references to many places and businesses of O'Malley's childhood. Scott's world is populated by a down-to-earth supporting cast: Kim Pine, drummer, one of Scott's exes and childhood friend; Stephen Stills, the talent, singer and lead guitar for Stek Vs; young Neil, friend of the group and aspiring band member; Knives Chow. Scott Pilgrim is dating a high schooler. Ramona Flowers recently moved to Toronto from America and becomes Scott's new girlfriend after some chasing and his split from Knives. The League of Evil Exes, headed by Gideon Graves, with the sole purpose of controlling Ramona's future love life and, now killing Scott. Wallace Wells, Scott's gay roommate and sort of moral support. Stacey Pilgrim, Scott's younger sister and biggest critic. Envy Adams, Scott's ex, she broke up with him, it was pretty brutal. Lead singer of Clash at Demon Head. The world that Scott inhabits is a heightened reality with elements of computer games and manga. There is a heavy focus on the music and trappings of everyday life. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is the film adaptation of the comic series, and takes its name from Book 2 in the 6-part series. Directed and written by Edgar Wright, whose works include Space the TV series, movies Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead. Wright has become known for his directing due to distinct style, and heavily referencing other works in both his filming and writing. Unlike most adaptations, the creator Brian Lee O'Malley was heavily featured during the writing, conceptualizing, and even filming of the project. It is noteworthy that the books 5 and 6 were not finished during the production of the movie, and rather the movie referencing the books. In some cases during these 2 volumes, it is the other way around. The movie is faithful to the comic in style, narrative and vision, but at a point where the last 2 books should be, it veers wildly due to the lack of source material. Concepts and in some cases characters were condensed for the movie, even in the case of Scott himself, and especially the omission of Knives' father, and story for Roxy, Todd and the Katinagi twins. As with the story being written in Toronto, and heavily referencing names and places, the movie made a special effort and managed to shoot in locations mentioned and even restore some to their former glory. The music and fight sequences for the movie obviously surpass the capabilities of a comic to deliver an experience only hinted at, but all envisioned by O'Malley. The actors were not only heavily involved in stunts, but also in the music, singing and playing for several relevant tracks. And here is the point that I'd normally sit and talk about a game whilst playing it. Unfortunately, because, well, I'm talking about a comic book and a movie, what I've done is, obviously, I've put movie trailers behind this. The reason for that is that I didn't want to just stick boring stills of the actual comic book behind the speech about the comic book. I'm just not good enough to do that yet and make it interesting. So, you know, you've got the movie trailers. I didn't also want to rip stuff from the movie and put the movie in there. So, again, you've got the movie trailers. It's a pretty good representation of most of the story and the themes and the plot. Well, what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit separately about the comic and the movie, and then kind of compare and contrast. The reason I want to do this is because both of them are separate in themselves, brilliant pieces, and together they give a more rich story and universe. Well, so let's begin with the Scott Pilgrim comic. I've written a couple of things down here, like the manga style of art I like this manga stylized world. I think O'Malley's drawings do look really good, and they fit the surrealist nature of the world itself that Scott inhabits. It is a down-to-earth and mundane story plot, really. The reality is that the comic itself is kind of a romantic comedy, and the reason I say this is because the overarching theme of the actual book and of the movie is the romance between Ramona and Scott. The reason I say it's a comedy is because obviously it's full of humour, but it's not a normal romantic comedy. This is a rom-com, but with a complete difference. This is a rom-com from the male perspective. It's a man's rom-com. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying women won't enjoy it. I'm not saying it's not directly based on, you know, the understandings and feelings of women either, or it actually just goes all the way to shut them out like some would. It really emphasises the male parts. In what rom-com would you have two guys fighting in a kung fu style? It's all this that makes it more of a man's rom-com. And this, you know, really adds to the overarching story, to be honest. All the geek references on top of that, all the references to things like Zelda and Sonic and Mario, and even the verses at the beginning of all the bounce is very reminiscent of Street Fighter. You can't really pin it directly on Street Fighter, but it is pretty reminiscent of Street Fighter. It's the down-to-earth story and the mundane portrayal of Scott's life that's completely juxtaposed to this surrealist world that really adds to the feeling of the book. And to be honest, you know, I really enjoy the love story, the kung fu style of everything that's going on. This is how I'd like to see my world. If I could be in Scott's head and see the world like this. I am a martial artist. I practice martial arts, I go to the gym, and if I could see every time that I get into a fight that this is the world that I inhabit, I would be over the moon. This is the world I want to be in, personally. A couple of more things here. It's well populated. The supporting cast is brilliant. Unlike with say a Marvel or a DC comic, I'm picking on them because they're the main two that most people know about. With them, if you've got a supporting cast, the supporting cast will be pushed to the forefront so that there can be some sort of spin-off and some sort of conceptualizing of their world as well as the main character's world. What we have here with Scott Pilgrim is we have a world that's well populated by these people, but they're never brought to the forefront. They're part of the scenery rather than anything else, and they really work well as part of the scenery. In each the right, they all have their own story to tell, but it's all there as part of Scott's story. It really feels like, with the world itself, that because of the way it's set up, we're only seeing a portion of Scott's world. That's right, we're only seeing a period of time over a couple of years with the comic, and a lot shorter with the movie. It's a visual feast. Really silly, I know. But the reason I've written that is because it looks good. If you look at the actual artwork itself, it is very stylized and it works very well. Really, you know, I've got to come on to a couple of bad points. The jump cuts can be difficult. The jump cuts can sometimes be difficult in the comic book. In the comic book, the jump cuts can be really solid. They can jump completely from one place to another in 1 second before you even know what's going on. Obviously, some people won't be able to stand it in black and white. That's a personal gripe for some people. Me, I don't mind. I've read plenty of comics in black and white. Really, I found that in the comic, I didn't really empathise with Scott. I found him a bit of a douche in some places. And some of the things he said and did, I would have punched him in the face myself. Some people may not grasp the concept of subspace hideaways. Unfortunately for the general populace that don't like physics in the way a lot of people that hopefully are watching this will, then the concept of a subspace highway, partially a wormhole through someone's brain, may be hard to grasp. So now, really onto the movie itself. I'm not going to say too much about the movie because I've already said plenty, in that the movie itself really encapsulates the book. It really does. It encapsulates the style and the movement into a more realistic form. And it does it very well, so it really goes without saying. You look at the comic and then watch the movie and it's obvious. It's there and it works. The supporting cast and everything else, they're fully fleshed out as the way they should be. As I said before, there are some things that are condensed or cut in certain parts of the story, but I don't want to give too much of the story away by explaining those too much, in the fact that they're there because they're a necessity. They work is what's really important here. To be honest, I only watched this movie once or twice before I realised that this is one of my favourite movies of all times. Really an important part of this movie, that the references and the world itself that is kind of surrealist does work. After looking into this and looking into the works of Edgar Wright, I didn't really know that much about him. I knew he'd directed for Nick Frost and Simon Pegg. Well, I went back and looked, and I found out he'd done the Space TV series. I mean, I like the Space TV series more than I like their movies. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And also, on top of that, I found out that Edgar Wright's done some work with Bill Bailey, one of my favourite comedians. I mean, if you look at the body of work of Edgar Wright, I can really say this is the movie for me. There's a reason this is one of my favourite movies. Only watching it a couple of times, it really is the movie for me. So let's compare and contrast the comic and the movie. The real comparison between the two is how well they work together and how in sync they are and how well it's done. And a lot of this is obviously because that Brian Lee O'Malley was actually working on the movie as much as he was on the comic. Feels wildly off for the last two, where should be the last two comic books, because Brian Lee O'Malley hadn't written them. There's references, there's even a costume that they mention that ends up in the comic book that wasn't there originally. You know, it wasn't one of Brian Lee O'Malley's designs, it was one of the costume designers' designs, but it fit so well that Brian put it in. To be honest, I actually kind of like the movie more. Most purists would say that you've got to like the comic book first, and there's even references to people saying that the movie isn't quite as good as the comic in the movie. They even make references to the comic book in the movie itself and have a self-deprecating humour about the movie. And really this all adds to it. I think, to be honest, there are some bits that I would have liked to see added into the movie that were in the comic, but really overall they're both individual bodies of work that really complement each other in style and form and function. I hope that this has been not too painful for you to listen to, and that it's actually helped inform you, and really, you know, it's just my feelings on both of the bodies of work. So what I shall say is that next I'm going to cover the game by itself, because obviously it's a game, it can stand alone. It really won't have the same narrative and understanding of the actual comic book and movie. I wanted to do them separately together because they really need to be done together. So what I'll say now is, I'm the Stek, I'll see you around.